Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the workshop 254. It is the 12th day of February, the year being 2022, and the time is 6:20 p.m. East African time. Of course, our conversation for the day is on inclusivity within the engineering profession. We have the different cadres of engineers. We have engineers, we have technologists, technicians, and artisans. And the conversation for the day is on having all these professionals working together in delivering engineering services. So for our guests, we have Professor Ondieki, a registered consulting engineering technologist by Ketra. We also have engineer Stephen Auma, who's been a guest with us here before. We'll give Professor Ondieki the opportunity to introduce himself first, and then you can say something a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Engineer Namano. I'm Professor Charles Manaso Ondieki. I'm a professor of engineering management at the Multimedia University. Previously, I was working as a lecturer at Egerton University, where I served for 10 years before I left in 2011 January to join Multimedia University. My work mainly is on lecturing, carrying out research on various topics. I'm also involved in life skills, which are mainly for TVET institutions. I've published 8 books, some on engineering and some on life skills. And I've also previously been the chairman of TVET CITAC. TVET CITAC is a body in charge of curriculum development, assessment, and certification council, dealing with all matters concerning with the examination and assessment in TVET institutions in Kenya, both private and government institutions. And I've also been involved in matters concerning the Chuakali, or what we call micro and small enterprises, and many other issues which concern with the development of engineering technology. At the moment, I'm the National Treasurer of Institution of Engineering Technologists and Technicians, and I've been also a board member of the KETRA, that's the Kenya Engineering Technology Research Board. That's as far as my profile is concerned.
Thank you very much, Professor. And over to you, Engineer Auma.
Okay, yeah, so I am Engineer Stephen Auma, practicing consulting mechanical engineer based in Nairobi. I graduated from the University of Nairobi in 1987 and thereafter joined the Ministry of Public Works as an assistant mechanical engineer. Those days you used to be employed sometimes before even the results come out. So I think I was employed 2 weeks after the results came out. And the results themselves came out 2 weeks after we finished, after we did the last paper. So things were very efficient at that time.
Good time.
Yeah, so I worked in the Ministry of Public Works from 1987 to 1990, and then joined a company called Industrial Plant in Nairobi on Kampala Road. We were fabricating cranes, gantry cranes, and we were also designing and fabricating pressure vessels. I was there up to 1992. And then after that, I went into self-employment.
I think he's lost network. It's okay, he's just come back. It's okay, Professor Ondieki. We can just proceed with the conversation. When he comes back online, we'll just pick it up from there. So the engineering profession, Professor.
Yes.
You've been in this space for years, decades,
for many
exact.
Yes. Yeah.
So who are the practitioners of engineering?
The practitioners of engineering are what I can call the personnel that belong to the engineering team. The engineering team consists of the artisan, technician, technologists, engineers, and engineering scientists. Those are the practitioners.
5 practitioners.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let us come to our country here, Kenya.
Yeah.
Let us look at the regulatory environment, the regulation of these practitioners.
Yeah, that's right. In Kenya, there are 2 regulatory organizations or regulating organizations. Yes. This is the Engineers Board of Kenya, which is regulating engineers, and we have Kenya Engineering Technology Registration Board,
Yes.
which regulates technologies, technicians, and those craftsmen and artisans which belong to part of the technician. These are the
Continue,
two
Prof.
bodies, I would say, which are in place. One which has been there since 1960, I would say 69, from ERB to EBK, and then the other ones at 2016. Yeah.
That is KETRA. So who regulates what of the engineering scientists?
Now, the engineering science,
Yes.
remember the engineering scientists are
Yes.
those with the postgraduate qualification, that's masters and PhDs, and they belong to NA. They can belong to a Kenya Engineering Technology Registration Board or what we call Engineers Board of Kenya.
Okay,
Yeah.
that is well understood. So let us just pause you there for a moment. Then let us have Engineer Auma say something about the regulatory environment. Engineer Auma, I believe you're back, eh?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah. Now, Engineer Namano, I think you asked us as to why we have two regulatory bodies. Yes, it has some history, which is it is a Kenyan culture of exclusivity.
I like that.
Yeah, Kenyans are having that culture of self-importance. They just feel that this is our turf, nobody should encroach, and so forth. So just as you're saying, we initially had one body that was in charge of all engineering practitioners. And then we had a chance to reform the regime of engineering management because we had the Engineers Registration Act at that time. Because what was managing engineering practice at that time was a board under the Ministry of Public Works. Actually, the chairman of Engineers Registration Board was the permanent secretary of Public Works.
That's right.
And the registrar was a superintendent engineer, seconded there by the permanent secretary. So he's someone who could be moved at any time. So it was just a small department under the Ministry of Public Works. Then there was now a need to make it more, to have more mandates, to be more independent, and to have a very clear mandate. And that is when now we started the process of writing Engineers Act. So Engineers Act was written over a long period of time, and of course it went through a few amendments before it came to be what it is right now. And it is at that time when a few of engineers decided to create a distinction between what they wanted to call engineers and what they were calling technologists and technicians. And I don't know why they thought that the best way to create that distinction is to have an act of parliament which only talks about people they are calling engineers and exclude what the people they are calling technologists and technicians.
Yeah.
So technologists and technicians, having been labeled by engineers that way, felt marginalized. And again, Kenya being what it is, everything is politicized. They had to look for some political patronage in order to also claim their space. And they succeeded. They succeeded in also being recognized as what they are. And that is how we ended up with the two regulatory bodies. In other words, the two regulatory bodies are there not because it's a well thought out process, which is a product of a systematic move. It was as a result of marginalization. A certain section of the engineering fraternity was deliberately branded as people who are not or do not qualify to be called engineers. And they had to fight for survival. And that's how they actually championed the enactment of an act of parliament to regulate technologies and technicians who had been marginalized by the Engineers Act. That is how we ended up with two regulatory bodies. Thank you.
Maybe can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Professor.
Now, Engineer Auma has really said exactly what went on. And maybe if I can add more, is that the Engineers Board of Kenya officials that time, technologists and technicians, according to them, are people who who never went to school properly. According to them, they were failures. Now, which was wrong, of course. And they never recognized that actually that was a cadre that was very, very important to the building of any country's economy. Even in spite of most of them having traveled outside Kenya, and they had seen what was going on. Take example, Nigeria, South Africa, Britain, and all these other countries around. They still continued saying that they could not recognize them.
Yes.
As if they did not know their role. But then the fight started. I would say it's a fight because it was really a very strong fight, because when we went to parliament, they really put up a very strong fight that the Kenya Engineering Research Board should not be there. There should be no act concerning engineering technology. But then at the end, we managed to convince the MP parliament, and then it was passed. But after passing that law, there are so many changes which have happened in the EPK itself now. Because previously, in fact, EPK was registering very few people as professional engineers. In fact, by the time we were in parliament, that time, the number was 1,860, total number in the country, out of more than 60,000 engineers. And most engineers were just registered what we call graduate engineers. And people could stay graduate engineers for more than even 30 years, which was absurd. And even now, still there are very many who are graduate engineers, and they have stayed more than 3 years. In fact, the number of years one is supposed to stay as a graduate engineer should not exceed 3 years. But in Kenya, it is very funny. But I think it's now changing a bit because they realize some of the engineers who are registering with the Kenya Engineering Technology Registration Board, and therefore they started relaxing the rules. I would also say that the board, which was there previously, have the officials have been replaced. Therefore, there is a very big change now in EPK. I would say it is now more friendly, and they are willing to talk to the other part of the engineering technology. So it has opened for many graduate engineers to be registered as professional engineers, I would say. I don't know the number right now, but I may say it may not have reached 3,000.
The number is increasing. There are actually more drives. We have more drives to register more engineers, have more graduate engineers registering as professional engineers. But the background is well appreciated from Engineer Auma and Professor Ondieki. It's good to have our history, because unless we know where we are coming from, it's really hard for us to forge a good way or a proper way forward. So that is well appreciated. We now move from the regulators, and now let us come to our professional societies. Professor Ondieki, you say you are the honorary treasurer for IET. Engineer Auma, I believe you will be contesting this year. So my question to you, Professor Ondieki, why do we have two societies?
I think it follows from the first one. The first question,
yes.
Why do we have two regulators? Is that the IK was not admitting technologies and technicians. That is because if you look at back, the same people who are manning IK were the same people who are also in EBK. And therefore, the feeling they had was the same. And actually, the way they put it is that for you to be registered as a professional engineer, or graduate engineer, you have to be a member of IK. The same thing now happens to also to CAT. Actually, worldwide, you must be a member of a society before you become a professional. And IK and as well as IAT, there are societies which are registered under the Society Act, but there are also people who are preparing various katas to become professionals. And besides, they also offer professional courses which will make the engineers to remain professional rather than staying and then they can decay. And I think that is the reason. But the way we are doing it is not right. I must say that. We should not be having two, nor should we have two regulatory bodies, because the work that is done by engineers is the same work, but it must be done by all the 5 cadres. That is the artisan, craftsmen, technician, technologists, and the engineers. And of course, the engineer scientists come in at the end. So it is something which is bringing a problem right now in this country, and we are noticing it. And maybe something should be done to bring these groups together and unify all of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, for that insight. Now, over to you, Engineer Auma. We have two societies. Why?
Yeah, I think Professor said it all. It's a logical consequence of having two different regulatory bodies. What I can remember, just to give some background, because Professor has already explained why we have two bodies. When engineers or those who are in charge of UBK realized that their move to marginalize technologies that failed after they had their own regulatory body, they now started a move to amend the Engineers Act so that they could bring them back. You know, the people that sent away, they could bring them back to the fold because they realized that it was counterproductive. Chasing them away or marginalizing them was counterproductive. So there was a move to amend the Engineers Act to provide for technology technicians. And IEK at that time took a cue, and just as Professor is rightly saying, it's the same people who are running both the society and the regulatory body. So IEK took a cue, and at that time, I think IEK was also reviewing its constitution, and they quickly included before the new constitution, the constitution that we now have at IEK. That constitution quickly provided for technologists and technicians because the constitution that we have right now was promulgated after the technologists and technicians had succeeded in having their acts, the regulatory body. So IK went ahead of EBK and provided for technologists and technicians. So if you read our constitution now, you will see that there is a provision that allows technologists and technicians to be members. Now, that means that those guys realized the mistake they made. And I think going forward, it is inevitable that we will merge again and have one regulatory body for all these people, all the practitioners in the engineering fraternity.
Like
and
South
of course,
Africa.
one society for the same. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Engineer Auma. So yeah, actually, I was about to bring the issue of the IEK constitution having classes for technicians and technologists, but I've never had any training session, never seen any CPD points being given to courses being organized for these particular classes of engineering practitioners. That is a conversation for another day.
Can I say something about that? Or?
Yes, kindly do.
Yeah. Just as I've said, it was an afterthought, a very rushy move to include technologists and technicians in the constitution. Actually, it was a decision of probably one or two people at IK to just slot them into the constitution. And that is why we don't have that framework of conducting training or interviews or something like that for technologists, because it was just slotted in there and then those guys forgot about it. But now when we started the second move now to review our constitution, the committee that was formed to review IEK constitution, whose secretary I was, came up with a draft which has provided for a very systematic framework of taking technologies and technicians through the process of becoming a member, what they should go through, interviews and things like that. We provided for that in our draft constitution, which has never seen the light of day. Thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, kindly do, Professor.
Now, you see, the problem is there. While the IK has really opened for technologists and technicians to be members, the problem which is there is that you can be a member of IK, but it just remains there. It will never give you a chance to practice, because to practice professionally, you have to be registered by EBK, and EBK doesn't have any room for technology and technician, and therefore the people are feeling that if we join IK, it will be just because maybe IK wants some money from us, and that's all. That is a serious issue. But that's why these issues should be discussed even jointly by IK, EBK, even IT, and KETRA, so that it will make some meaning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, for that. Okay, just from where we are, I'll ask you, Professor, which is best, to have one regulator regulating the entire profession, or is it best to have different regulators as we have currently?
We can still have two as they are, but then working harmoniously with a lot of understanding. But the most appropriate one is to have one regulatory body, like South Africa, where everyone is known, the work of every cadre is known, and all the rules are governed by one body. And that way, coordination becomes very easy. And you may not, in such a circumstance, you may not have this kind of problem we have had, especially with the building collapsing every now and then. It can solve that very, very fast. But you can also have different one, but so long as there is some understanding. Or you can have two separate one and then one umbrella. That one, I've seen some countries have that, where you have an umbrella body that combines the two, and then you have individual one. But again, that becomes too expensive, but it can still work. Some countries have separate ones, but the ones which have separate, I think I know is Canada, but the majority still have one, and I think they don't have problem as far as I know. In Kenya, we have had problems. The reason is that what Engineer Auma put it in the beginning, that some people like Kenyans, we like exclusivity, where some people feel they are better or more superior than others. You know, that kind of thing is what we call prejudice in psychology. This is the one which has affected the country very, very seriously. And the effect is felt in the building industry, where you find a building, for example, is being attended to by mainly the engineering technology personnel. That means the artisan, craftsmen, technicians, and technologists. The engineer's work is mainly on the design, and very rare that he comes to supervise. And therefore, he may not be able, and in any case, even we were to say that the building has to be attended to by a registered engineer or professional engineer, it may not be possible, because at any instant, we have more than 2 million buildings going on. And the people who are registered as engineers, and more so to civil engineers, they may not be more than 500. And therefore, it will not work. According to, if you go to the Act, the Engineers Act, it can't work. So that means we have a problem. And that's why we are saying we must put all people together, and they must all be registered so that they are all accountable. Whether it's an artisan, he should be accountable, so that we can see the work of the artisan is A, B, C, D. The craftsman is this one. The technician is this. The technology is this one. The engineer is this. So that when a building falls down, we can investigate and find out why it did fall down. And then we can pin the person. We cannot go on saying it's the developer or the contractor. The contractor may not be an engineer even. The owner he may not even have any knowledge in engineering. And therefore, those are the kind of things we are. That is the reason why we will advocate for one body to regulate all of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ondieki. Over to you, Engineer Auma. Same question. Which one is better?
Two or one?
Yes.
That is the question. I concur with what Professor has said. You see, it's just the same thing I said. If you look at these other professions, let's say medicine, for instance, they used to have one body which was in charge of all professionals in the medical field. Then, because of the same problem, we then now had to have nurses having their own regulatory body. We now have even one for clinical officers, like that. And it's a problem, as you must have heard of cases of management of patients and things like that. So that is the problem we have, which the professor has explained very well, that if we have different or multiple agencies regulating the same industry, then you are bound to have those kind of problems. Now look at accountancy. Accountancy has only one body, which is in charge of the lowest accounts clerk or something up to the highest. And then they are provided for progression, how you can move from being an accounts technician to the topmost accountant. So there's a harmony. You can see in accounts, there's no problem. It is one body and all the activities are regulated and coordinated very well. And then nobody feels marginalized or prejudiced, as Professor is saying, because even the accounting technician, there's a process of improving and moving up the scale until they become the topmost, accountant. And I think that is what should be there for every profession, because immediately you have 2 or 3 more than one regulatory bodies, there's bound to be conflict. Some will be undermining others, and then you don't know how to deal with inefficiencies. It will be confusion. So my short answer to your question is 1 is better than 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer. Now, again, just the same issue, but now we are looking at societies. We have IET, we have IEK. Which is better, Engineer Auma? Then we'll go to Professor Ondieki.
The answer is the same because they are related. One, multiple regulatory bodies definitely will have to lead to multiple societies. Of course, as Professor is saying, there are some where it is different. But we still I don't see the need to have multiple societies because a society is there to take care of the welfare of its members. That's why we have the society. The IEK or the IET is just there to take care of the welfare of its members. The regulatory body is just there to maintain standards. So if we have multiple societies, we still have the same problem. If we had one society, because the society will be a partner to the regulatory body in maintaining standards, in developing capacity training, and things like that. So even at the society level, 1 is better than 2. Thank you.
Maybe I can comment on the society also.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, okay, actually, as the engineer Auma said, we need to have one society, but we can also have multiple on condition that the multiple societies are for different trades. For example, you can have a society concerning with electrical engineering from the lowest to the highest, and you can have one for maybe civil engineer from the lowest to the highest, but they are only welfare of that trade, not a society for engineering, technologies, technician, and then another one for engineers. That kind of separation is not good. It's better we have one.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Engineer Auma. This was just to lay grounds for second and possibly a third session. You can see the questions that we've had just general, but now we'll pick up this same conversation. Now we'll go deeper into how we can achieve this inclusivity and the upsides to having it working for us. You can see we have the Chinese running everywhere. We have foreigners doing everything for us. It's not that we lack the capacity.
Because we are not united.
Yes, that is the reality of it all. The disunity is what is working against. Kindly, my seniors ask that we conclude the session at that. And those who joined in, thank you very much. So, gentlemen, can we call it a night?
Oh, can we call it a night? Thanks for hosting this. And I think it's a good beginning, and we need to maintain this.
It will be maintained, Professor. Engineer Auma can attest to that.
Okay, I think I've enjoyed it, and I've liked it, and I think we need this kind of conversation.
You're very welcome, Professor.
And thank you, Engineer Auma. And I think we should be continuing that way. We will succeed in Kenya.
We will.
We have no option.
We have no option. You are right. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.